Bonjour et bienvenue à ce deuxième épisode de l'Asie en question de l'Observatoire des droits de la personne de l'Université de Montréal. Aujourd'hui, Camille Tom et moi-même, Diana Catalan, avons l'honneur de recevoir Angela Asuncion, consultante technique principale et spécialiste des transitions énergétiques justes à Bantay Kita, qui est une organisation qui se consacre à la promotion de la transparence et de la responsabilité au sein des industries extractives des Philippines et qui travaille en étroite collaboration avec les communautés affectées par l'exploitation minière. Bantay Kita se veut ainsi une coalition nationale philippine pour la responsabilité minière et l'autonomisation des communautés. Angela Asuncion a obtenu une maîtrise en planification et en développement rural dans le domaine des études de développement international et une licence en gestion des ressources biologiques avec une spécialisation en gestion de l'environnement à l'Université de Guelph au Canada. Angela est actuellement consultante en développement spécialisée dans l'exploitation minière à grande échelle, la gouvernance des ressources naturelles et l'équité climatique auprès de Bantay Kita aux Philippines. Exceptionnellement, le reste de l'entrevue se déroulera en anglais. Bonne écoute.
I'll just give a bit of context really quickly to give a bit of information on what exactly we'll be tackling today. So the Philippines is said to be one of the most mineral-rich countries in the world. So there's a magazine, New Solutions, the Journal of Environmental and Occupational Health Policy, that ranks the Philippines 5th in terms of mineral reserves in 2015, 3rd in gold reserves, 4th in copper, and 5th in nickel. Moreover, 30% of the country's total land area is believed to contain important metallic minerals, and once again, those are 2015 numbers. Yet, to this date, the mining industry contributes to only 0.89% to the Philippines' GDP, the gross domestic product, still in 2021. As you explain in one article you co-authored with John Edison Ubaldo on Canadian transnational mining in the Philippines, over 60% of transnational mines are currently operating in ancestral lands in the Philippines, raising questions and even causing harm on the local communities, especially on Indigenous peoples. Large-scale mining in the Philippines has been marred with allegations of human rights violations and environmental abuses. So our first question would be, how does large-scale mining contribute to human rights abuses, and particularly concerning Indigenous communities and environmental degradation?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Diana and Camille, for having me. It's such an honor to be able to share Bantay Kita's work and to be able to amplify community voices on the ground. And this is such a great question. So, like you mentioned, the Philippines has been subjugated to over 400 years of colonial history, being plundered and looted by hegemonic nations such as Spain, the US, and Japan. And so, despite obtaining sovereignty from the US in 1946, the Philippines continues to be subjugated to neocolonialism emanating from domestic elite oligarchies, transnational capitalist enterprises, and foreign imperial powers. But what we're seeing now is the rise in green colonialism. So capital-driven energy transitions have led to the emergence of new frontiers of environmental injustices and the advent of green colonialism, especially within transition mineral-rich underdeveloped nations such as the Philippines. And there's a study that shows that 69% of energy transition minerals, the minerals that are necessary to produce renewable energy and green technology such as nickel, copper, lithium, cobalt, are overlapped on ancestral domains across the world. And so what we're seeing is the advent of green colonialism. And this can be defined as the predatory appropriation of land and resources between the global north and global south through extractivism, which is branded through sustainability and climate solutions. So rather than addressing the long-standing egregious human and environmental rights violations that's ridden throughout the extractive industry and upon Indigenous peoples, such as water scarcity, water pollution, infringement on cultural and sacred lands and territories of ancestral domains, widespread deforestation, the removal of carbon sinks, extrajudicial killings of environmental activists and land defenders that are speaking out against exploitative mining operations. What we're seeing is that the sector historically and up till now has used public impression management, such as corporate social responsibility and up-to-date environmental social governance discourse to foster goodwill and trust amongst stakeholders, manipulating the narrative without addressing or providing remedy to long-standing abuse and violations.
Thank you. That's so amazing. Just a good answer. Thank you so much. And well, how do mining companies exploit power dynamics and cultural vulnerabilities to secure the consent of Indigenous communities? And what are the consequences for Indigenous rights and their self-determination?
Thanks so much. That's a great question. So, based off of our previous research, we recognize that host, community, and company mining relations are increasingly complex, and the politics of indigeneity play a fundamental role in the ways that Indigenous community members perceive mining. So specifically, our previous research demonstrates the tribal dealer phenomenon, where corporate and government officials manufacture consent for mining in two ways. One, the corruption, bribery, and co-optation of Indigenous leaders, and two, the forgery of Indigenous land ownership through fabricated genealogies. So the first part of this tribal dealer phenomenon is that the mining sector in the Philippines is notorious for corruption, with evidence of development projects and monetary payments being made to communities before or during free, prior, and informed consent processes. And some of the reasons why the Philippines mining sector is notorious for corruption is because of regulatory capture. And so majority of the Philippine government is made up of elite dynasties that have their own private interests within mining operations in the Philippines. And so rather than passing legislation such as beneficial ownership transparency, having a public registry of the owners' names that's available to the Filipino citizens to be able to hold them accountable to their mining operations, they're not passing that legislation because they have their own private interests to be able to continue profiting from mining exploitation. So the second part of the tribal dealer phenomenon is the forgery of Indigenous land ownership through the fabrication of genealogies. So what this phenomenon means is tribal leaders and elders who possess rights to the associated ancestral domain and resist mining operations. Local politicians, National Commission on Indigenous Peoples officials, and mining corporations have corrupted free, prior, and informed consent processes by choosing individuals to be placed in leadership positions at the company's advantage. So previous scholars such as William Holden and Paredes in 2019 have described similar processes of government officials and mining corporations undertaking the manipulation of FPIC processes through the co-optation of an Indigenous person who does not possess the authority to represent the host community or the community where the mining operations are supposed to be located in. So our findings had reinforced this phenomenon, with the respondents through our key informant interviews highlighting that a chosen individual, either from a different territory or identifies as an Indigenous member who's submissive to mining within the community, is coerced into supporting the mining project. And to legitimize this individual's leadership in the area, the company manufactures a comprehensive genealogy of an entire tribe following the individual's ancestral lineage. And once this process is completed and the signature of the fraudulent leader is obtained, the mining company can begin its operation. So it's a very complex web and dynamic of different types of corrupt behavior between institutions.
That is very interesting to learn about. I was not familiar with the processes. You mentioned the problem of corruption and bribery of community or tribal leaders. You also spoke about elite dynasties. Now, another actor present in these processes are surely government leaders. So what role do the government leaders play in these processes? And what role do they play in regulating mining activities, maybe to protect human rights? What are the gaps? Maybe what is left to do in this regard?
Thanks so much, Diana. That's a great question. So governments play a fundamental role in regulating mining activities to protect human rights. And so actually the Philippines holds some of the world's most progressive legislations. For example, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997, IPRA law, is one of the world's most advanced laws when it comes to the legal recognition and protection of the rights of Indigenous peoples. However, the gap in regulatory frameworks is the effective implementation of legislative provisions on the ground. So whether it be due to lack of technical capacity, lack of technology, lack of resources, or corruption itself, the implementation of law on the ground is not being done properly and not being done in the interest of the communities that are frontline to the environmental devastation of exploitative mining operations. So the Philippines faces a significant issue in the overlapping of tenurial instruments. So for example, on top of a mining tenement, let's say a mineral production sharing agreement, MPSA, there will also be an overlap with the key biodiversity area, proclaimed protected watershed, and a certificate of ancestral domain title. So the overlap in tenurial instruments have resulted in major conflict and a lack of action between government agencies, as there's no clear delineation of which institution should be addressing the issue. And so there's also a lack of harmonization between policies and government agencies in the Philippines, which are similarly mandated and tasked with the regulation and implementation of mining accountability, environmental protection, and Indigenous rights. And so what we're seeing, for example, if there is a issue with the community in terms of mining pollution in the area, there's several different government agencies that should be mandated and tasked to be able to address it. And so because there's not a clear delineation of who should be doing it, the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, the Environment Management Bureau, they're all, and the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, all of these government agencies are conflicted on who to be able, who will be able to take on this issue. And so there's a lack of action on the ground after as well.
And now, if we want to look at successful examples of collaboration approaches between mining companies, government, and communities to mitigate the negative impact on mining and human rights, would you say there were any examples?
So I do believe that a multi-stakeholder approach is critical in ensuring that we're able to address these issues in a holistic way. And so an example that's in the Philippines is the Philippines Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, or PHEITI. So this is a government-led multi-stakeholder initiative that's implementing EITI, which is the global standard that promotes the open, accountable management and good governance of oil, gas, and mineral resources. And the the Bantay Kita is the civil society organization sitting within the Philippine EITI multi-stakeholder group. And so a little bit more about the EITI. It's a global standard of transparency that requires oil, gas, and mining companies to publish what they pay to the government and the government to publish what they collect from these companies. So the initiative aims to encourage countries to be more transparent in reporting the benefits they receive from their country's natural resources. And by publishing material information on payments and revenues, the EITI aims to address the natural resource curse phenomenon in resource-rich but poor economies. So the Philippine EITI Civil Society Organization Multi-Stakeholder Group, it's a really big acronym. It's made up of industry representatives from oil and gas and mining, as well as government officials across agencies in the Philippines, as well as civil society, which includes Bantay Kita. And they work together to be able to address the issues that are inherent within the extractive industry in the Philippines. But there are gaps evident within the capacity for PHEITI to address community impacts on human rights. So, for example, they have a grievance mechanism for community members that are directly affected to be able to share their complaints in hopes for remedy to the issues that they're facing on the ground. But the grievance mechanisms are inaccessible and they have a long wait time before assessment. So afterwards, the complaint is sent to another government agency usually, which will often take a long time to respond as well. So there's a lack of urgency and many bureaucratic loopholes to go through for the community. And oftentimes the community members don't have the literacy or education to be able to undergo the administrative processes of submitting complaints. So this further adds to the lack of accessibility for communities on the ground.
Thank you so much for your response. You actually tackled part of our next question. So you spoke about the civil society. Outside of Bantay Kita and government initiatives or civil society initiatives, how about what role does I would say everyday people in the communities, for example, even with the lack of literacy that you just mentioned just now, lack of accessibility, are there other ways that they're bringing awareness to their issues within the civil society, within the government agencies, for example?
So I wanted to highlight, even if community members have a lack of literacy or a lower education that's tied to our Western idea of what education is, I've never been so honored to be able to learn from the communities. And I've received a far greater education from listening to the powerful stories of community members and their wisdom on the ground than I have in my master's. So they are incredibly brilliant and so inspirational. And I think that the power of the collective and their strength to continue fighting for justice for themselves and for the environment is something that truly resonates with the civil society, such as Bantay Kita, that have the honor of learning from them. And so it's, like I mentioned, I really believe in the power of the collective and the power of storytelling. And so once Bantay Kita is able to learn from the communities on the ground, we have the honor of engaging and amplifying their voices and demands and needs in diverse spaces and between diverse stakeholders at the national, regional, and international levels, to be able to take advantage of any opportunity to be able to share their stories and desensitize the general public and government officials, civil society, on the realities that are happening on the ground. So, for example, at Bantay Kita, we push for the harmonization of human rights and people-centered policy provisions throughout all of our engagements. So at the moment, we engage with diverse institutions. This includes the Senate of the Philippines. Bantay Kita is a member of the Technical Working Group for the Rationalization of the Mining Fiscal Regime. And although it is focused on tax provisions at the national level, Bantay Kita continues to be able to ensure that we lobby for the rights of the communities that we are partnering with, to make sure that if they don't have a seat at the table at the Senate, that we're able to have the honor of sharing their story and being able to sensitize the realities, for example, even in the tax fiscal regime, of the harmful provisions that may occur if it's passed, and the human and environmental rights violations that will happen on the ground if these specific provisions are passed. And so that's an example at the national level. At the regional level, we also engage with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to find avenues for joint activities in relation to our recent work with the creation of Publish What You Pay, Asia Pacific Transition Mineral Accountability Regional Advocacy Plan. And so this regional advocacy plan that we've created together is made up of work between civil society leaders across Asia Pacific, including leaders in Australia, Indonesia, India, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and the Philippines, to be able to find avenues for collective action when it comes to ensuring that human and environmental rights due diligence is upheld throughout the green energy and technology supply chain, specifically ensuring that the communities that are hosting the raw materials necessary for a low carbon future are first safeguarded and protected through this whole just energy transition discourse that we're seeing. And so the regional advocacy plan that we created focuses on championing people and planet-centered justice in the just energy transition. And we've been hoping to engage at the UN level to be able to advocate for this work and be able to find ways for collaboration and ensuring that the communities on the ground are protected and empowered.
All right. I think we have time for one last question. We'll jump to another subject. So despite being mineral rich, so regions like Caraga in the Philippines, for example, remain impoverished, with mining exacerbating poverty and environmental degradation. Can you elaborate a bit more on how mining contributes to these socioeconomic disparities and the loss of livelihoods, for example, in these affected communities?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That's a really good question as well. And I think that it'd be best to be able to kind of create a vision of what it was like for us at Bantay Kita last year, when we spent 17 days living in remote communities affected by transition mineral mining in Dinagat Island, which is the nation's largest nickel ore producer. And so this island is a biodiversity hotspot and host to some of the most incredible natural landscapes I've ever seen, with baby shark sanctuaries where you can swim in and bonsai forests with the most diverse flora and fauna you can imagine. But the caveat is that the entire island was a declared mineral reservation area in 1935, which means for almost a century, the government has prioritized large-scale mining as the primary source of development in this region. So we conducted community-based legal empowerment capacity building sessions in parallel with local level energy transition research. So we were immersed with the communities, and in this short period of time, I felt the tangible effects of climate change. And so the second we got out of the van, I experienced the most dystopian and intense winds I've ever experienced in my life. And these winds did not stop for 4 days straight. And in one community, they gifted us the space to live in their wooden home on stilts at the edge of the ocean. And the winds were so strong that I woke up several times in the middle of the night thinking that the home would fly away. And when I was talking to the youth, I asked them, why are the winds so strong here? I've never experienced anything like this in my life. And they said, it's because tomorrow there's going to be a habagat, a southwest monsoon, and a typhoon combined. And the most terrifying part of this is when I asked, is this normal for you? And they said yes. And so what we're seeing is that not only is mining being justified as a solution to the climate crisis, but the greenwashing of it all is further exacerbating the climate inequities in mining communities hosting these raw materials for the energy transition. And so mining actually contributes 8 to 28% of global greenhouse gas emissions and is also responsible for widespread water pollution, environmental degradation, the removal of carbon sinks, and the devastation of critically climate mitigating ecosystems such as mangrove forests in Dinagat Island. And so they're making this region extremely vulnerable than they already are to the climate crisis. And so when we went on hikes with the communities where they showed us the devastation of nickel mining in their irrigation systems, watersheds, and mangrove ecosystems, they showed us thousands of hectares of farmlands destroyed from the chemical runoff of the nickel mining. And the majority of children playing in the community had pink eye from the nickel dust, with a lack of doctors in the area to provide medicine for these infections. When we were conducting our fieldwork in Dinagat, we were also faced with 3 to 24-hour blackouts. 15 out of the 17 days we were living with the communities. How can we ensure a just energy transition in the face of energy insecurity? And then 90% of nickel is shipped to China and Japan to be able to produce lithium-ion batteries, which are then sent to the US to create Tesla's electric vehicles. But with the Caraga region, the mining province of the Philippines, host to one of the largest poverty incidents in the nation. It is almost impossible to be able to imagine a Tesla being driven in these communities that are hosting these raw materials for the energy transition. And as a consultant, I work with CSO leaders across several countries in the Asia Pacific, and these issues are not unique to the Philippines. These problems are happening all across the world.
Thank you so much, Angela. That was really insightful. So we're running out of time, but thank you so much for joining us for this episode. It was really interesting and informative, and it really highlighted the impact of mining activities on human rights in the Philippines, and also promoted transparency and accountability for the mining industry to prevent any further violations. So hopefully this episode will be a step forward to raise awareness to this issue, not only in the Philippines, but every country affected by mining operations and violations of human rights. So thank you so much again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you again, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me. So great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pour cet épisode, l'équipe du balado L'Asie en question était composée de Diana Catalan et Camille Thom à la recherche et à l'animation et Jean-François Rancourt au montage et à la création musicale. Le balado L'Asie en question est produit par l'Observatoire des droits de la personne grâce au soutien de la chaire d'études asiatiques et indo-pacifiques du Centre d'études et de recherche internationale de l'Université de Montréal.